I am Jeanie Hill. I was born Martha Jean Smelser. I was the fifth of 6 children, born to Kenny and Mildred Smelser. I grew up in a Christian home in southern Orange County in Greenfield Township. We had the kindest neighbors. We went to Cook's Chapel, that was my home church, and there was a song called God's Gentle People, and that just reminded me of all the people that lived around us because they were gentle. I don't think I ever heard anyone say a cuss word until I was probably over 10 years old, 10 or 12, because they just weren't that kind of people. And they were just God's gentle people. From the time we were little, my parents always were singing somewhere, or we were just going to church. I mean, if there was a revival close by, you went. At that time, you know, we had a television, but you didn't watch it all the time. You know, a lot of times it wasn't even turned on. And so church was priority over anything like that. Mom and Dad were big on having music parties. We would have parties where we would have different people there, and sometimes it would just be playing music, but a lot of times it would be like a hymn sing almost. Just everybody singing together out of a songbook. And you know, that was just the entertainment back then, you know, and you might pop up some popcorn or something, but it was nothing elaborate, just neighbors. My mom and dad had a small farm, so you know, it was just a country girl. They made sorghum, and that was our main income. My mom and dad sang when we were little. They sang in a Southern Gospel quartet with his brothers, and we just, you know, we would just travel around to different little churches, usually within our own community. Sometimes they would sing in town, but most of the time it was just small churches. When Daddy's brothers quit singing with them, then they would have some of us kids sing with them, usually. I know my brothers sang with them until they got married and left home, and then they had us littler girls to sing with them. And me and my sisters had a trio, and we would sing a lot of places. I didn't know that there was different denominations. I really had never thought about it until I was up about 12 years old, because our church was non-denominational, and so when we went and sang anywhere, it just never occurred to me that people believed different things. I just thought they all believed in Jesus and that he had died and rose again, and he was our Savior. And I never thought about, you know, like denominations until I was older, which was really kind of neat because everybody was just the same. My mom and dad had a lot of pastor friends, and so my sisters and I have tried to make a list of all the pastors that had been at our house before. So when I was about 14, our church had a revival. So Albert Bennett preached this revival, and at our church, I'd never seen anybody go forward, never heard anybody shout. We would occasionally have people that would say amen or something, but nothing like that. But this particular night, I think we were probably on the second or third night of the revival, and I was under conviction, and, you know, of course, holding on to the pew in front of me with my knuckles white. And I finally told the Lord, I said, Lord, if anybody else goes forward, I will go. And I thought I was pretty safe because I had never seen anybody saved in that church. But one of the neighbor boys went forward, and his mother absolutely shouted. She just was so happy about it, and she just was shouting and crying, I think, probably a little too. And so then I could not hold on. And I went forward, and there were 12 other young people that went forward that night. And in that revival, there ended up being 21 people, I think, saved during that 1-week revival. We were all baptized on Sunday in Padoke River behind Alta White's house. and it was Pat Oakey at that time. Corps of Engineers had not been around, and so it was just a little country river that flew through the area. And after that, Albert and his wife Dora Lee started a youth group for us kids that went to church there or that were in the neighborhood. And they taught us a lot of things about growing up and being a good Christian. They taught us about tithing and being generous. They taught us about praying and fasting. They taught us about faith and having faith that God would take care of things. And they talked to us about communion and other things that are sacred and holding on to those things that are sacred. They talked to us about healing and that God still heals today just as he did in days before. And Dorley's daughter, Vicki, who was a good friend to me and my sister, Vicki at that time had a tooth healed. She had gone to a church service in French Lick and she had a cavity. And she was going to have to go back to the dentist to get the cavity filled. And during that service, her tooth was filled. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it was. And so they gave us a good basic start in life and my mom and dad were good Christians too. But I think having this emphasis on those things, and you learned them and you hid them in your heart. The thing they talked about was not being unequally yoked with not only for your spouse, but just your friends. If you had friends that were not Christians, you were better off not to let them persuade you, not to hang around them so much that they had persuasion over you. So then I got married at 18. We were not very equally yoked, but out of that marriage came 3 sons, Robert, Travis, and Andrew Toole. And they were my pride and joy. I mean, I enjoyed raising them. I had so much fun with them. When they were little, we would play board games. We would go outside and we would chase each other or play tag and play baseball. As they got older, of course, then they got other friends and things. But I still always, there was always a lot of kids in my house. I always had, and I know that I watched Vicky's kids a lot for her, for her, and she had 2 girls at that time, and they loved coming to my house. But Vicky said, "I can't get their clothes clean after they get to your house," because they would play. I would let them play outside, and they played, and but they enjoyed coming and enjoyed playing, and so I wasn't very strict on making them try to keep themselves clean. I just let them play. And so there were always, a lot of times there were kids at my house, other kids, and that was fine. I loved it. When my boys were little, we went to Valeene to church. Oh my gosh, it's been probably close to 50 years ago, but yes, when we went to Valeene to church, all these kids were babies. There were, so Jamie Bullington and Lisa were little. Mary Murphy's kids, Rebecca and Robert, were little. The Dooley twins were not as little as some of them. They were a little bit above some of them because little Chip was in with the little ones that were in the nursery, kind of, when I was there. My son Travis, Robbie was a little older. Danny Simpson and Tina were in that group. Betty Simpson came at that time, and her daughter Christy and Lee, her son Lee, would have been down there. And we ran around with all these people. I mean, these were just, and we would get together. There might be, I don't know, 3 or 4 couples and play cards or whatever. But there was a lot of fellowship, good fellowship between people. I know, I think Bobby Manship and I one time went to visit a lady that had been coming to church and hadn't been coming for a while, and we just went to visit her and tell her that she was missed. And but that was the kind of thing you did back then, was that you would go, and if somebody had missed a while, you would go and let them know that they were missed. And so there were just a lot of people there. Most wonderful choir you ever heard, because people sang parts. We had people that sang alto and tenor and bass and everything, and so you had just a really, really harmony in the choir. There was a lot of harmony and just beautiful songs. Mostly Southern, kind of Southern gospel type, with people singing different parts. In 1999, my first husband and I got a divorce. The boys were older. Andy was still at home. Andy was in the 8th grade, and Travis was a senior that year. But and we had joint custody of him, which was, well, it worked. Not real well, but it worked. And but I didn't get any child support, and so I worked a second job. I worked at the REMC office. That was my regular job. And then I worked at a convenience store for extra money, and I would work there on the weekends and some evenings. Occasionally they would call me, and I would go in at 2 o'clock to make donuts, but that was so I didn't have a lot of time for anything else, and for sleep. I did, during those first 2 years after our divorce, I did date some guys, but I found out it was too taxing, it was too tiring. And so during the 3rd year, my daughter-in-law Stephanie and her sister Rhonda introduced me, or fixed me up for a blind date with their dad. And we went to the movies, and their dad and I just hit it off really good. We were just simple country people. He had been a farmer. He was a dairy inspector at the time. And so, but we enjoyed all the same things. He liked to fish, I liked to fish. He liked to hike, and I do too. And we liked gardening. We just had a lot in common, and so we dated for about 2 years, and then we got married. And we were very happy together. He would pick me up after work, and we would go fishing. He would pick me up as soon as I got off. He would have everything ready, and we would head for whatever lake we were going to go to. John Hay Lake was fairly close, and so we would go there. But sometimes we'd come down to Tucker Lake, and Delaney Park was up there close too. So we got in a lot of fishing, caught a lot of fish too, and we would come home and clean the fish and clean everything up, and just have a good time. And we also liked to garden. We had a greenhouse, and we shared our plants with everybody in the country. If we had fruit trees, and whenever they would produce fruit, we would take what we wanted and give the rest away. So it was a joy to be able to do that. It was really a joy to be able to share with so many people. We did have a lot of ups and downs. We each had a number of surgeries. Don, shortly after we were married, had to have open heart surgery for the second time. And it went fine. Everything turned out okay. He had to have several stents put in later on at different times. And so during all those times, I was able to stay in the hospital with him. The hospital that we were at, the nurses were so kind, and they would bring me in a cot, and I could stay with him. Don had hurt his back lifting a log, of all things, we went to a neurosurgeon then, and his back was in such bad shape that the neurosurgeon said, well, I could do surgery. It would take an 8-hour surgery to do this. You'd probably still be in a lot of pain, and there's a good chance your heart would stop during it. So they didn't do surgery. But he did have a lot of back pain and would spend a lot of time on the couch. Later, he started having headaches, a lot of headaches. And we went to first one doctor and then another, trying to find out what was wrong. And nobody could seem to put a name to it or anything. So we finally went to a acupuncturist. And the first treatment helped. It did help, and he had several days where he wasn't in pain. We went back for a second treatment, and it didn't help so much. And the third treatment didn't help at all. She was a real smart girl. She was really good. And she said, looking at what's going on with him, he has some trembling and stuff. And she said, I think that he has, I have to think of what it's called, Lewy body dementia is what it was. And so she said, I suggest you go to IU, or not IU, but U of L Medical Center. She said, I happen to know that they're doing research on it right now. And so we got a neurologist over there. There wasn't a lot that they could do. There was some medicines they could get that would kind of help with the headaches. And they helped with, he had been having some, seeing things that weren't there. He's seen some people that weren't there. I came home one day from church, and he said so-and-so was there, and he said, would you please get rid of him? And so I told him to go away, to go home, and they did. So, that was just part of the delusions that came with it. He would also see animals every once in a while, which is a common thing that happens with some of those diseases. And from there, his health just kind of deteriorated. That was also the year of COVID, which made it hard going to doctor's visits, and he did have some therapy, some physical therapy. When he finally got to where he would fall, and I couldn't get him up by myself and had to have help. Several times I called neighbors, and they came over and would help me. But it finally got to the point where I needed some of the kids to come and help some. The only time I was not able to stay with him was after he had gotten sick towards the end, and I had taken him to the emergency room because he needed fluids. And that was a little bit after COVID, and they were still real cautious, and I could not stay with him that night. And that was the first night I had not been able to stay with him. And when I went the next morning, he asked me, he said, where have you been? You've been gone 3 weeks. And I can understand it seeming like that to him. So he made Stephanie promise him that she would not let me take him to the emergency room anymore. And shortly after that, we had to have hospice. Hospice had brought a hospital bed for him to stay in. And so the kids got to where they would come, and they would take turns of staying the night, because if he needed to go to the bathroom, I couldn't get him in a wheelchair, and needed somebody else there to help. He did really quite well. He was bedridden and had to have help for a couple of years. Probably a year or so before I needed the kids to stay with him some and everything. But for the most part, I was able to just stay with him and take care of him. And then the morning that he passed away, when we first found out that he had this, I had naturally just boo-hooed and everything. And I told him I didn't want him leaving me. And he said, well, I want you to come with me. And you know, anyway, we had that conversation then. But the morning that he died, he felt fairly good that morning, because he sat up on the side of the bed and he said, I want to talk to you. And so I went over and he said, I can't live like this. He said, I don't want to live like this in a hospital bed with nurses coming and poking and prodding and all of this. And I told him, I said, well, honey, when Jesus calls, just reach out your hand and go. It's okay. And he said, well, I want you to go with me. And I said, well, I have to wait for him to call my name. And but an hour after that, I had gave him his morning medicines and everything, but about an hour after that, he had a massive heart attack, which was horrible. I was the only one there, but he just kind of rolled from one side to the other. I could tell he was in just so much pain and everything. And finally, he just kind of heaved, and his chest rose up, and his head went back, and then limp. And I knew it was over. And I called the hospice people, and they came, and they handled everything from there on. I would say for the first, I don't know how many days, 3 or 4 days, I was just kind of out of it. I just couldn't cope. So, I mean, I did what I had to do, and, you know, I was talking and answering questions, but I don't know that I knew what I was saying or doing. After he was buried and everything, and I was back to being at home by myself, that's when the grief really begins to hit. And I kind of feel like sometimes that maybe that's part of the ministry that the Lord would want me to work in, is with people that have lost their spouse, because there's a lot of need there, and you need understanding, you need scriptures, finding out where the scriptures are that you need, because they don't ever always pop right out to you. The Lord is always there, and he doesn't ever go anywhere. I had a hard time there for a while because I couldn't feel him, you know, but I also knew that we don't go by feelings, we go by the word that's real. There used to be a song about that, I don't go by what I feel, I go by the word that's real. And so I know you can't just go by your feelings, because things are going on outside that, you know, cause you to feel differently and everything. But, you know, he's just there. And so even though I don't feel him necessarily when I pray, and I wonder sometimes, Lord, are you hearing this? You know, is it just going to the top of the ceiling and stopping? But, you know, that's not the way it is. That's not the way. I know, you know. Well, the hardest thing for me was trying to go to bed by myself. And so I got to where I would stay up till midnight until I thought I could just fall asleep, because every night when we went to bed, there was an I love you and a kiss. And I couldn't do that. And so I would just stay up really, really late until when my head hit the pillow, I would sleep. The whole first year, you're working through it. And it doesn't necessarily, it gets easier, but it's still there. It's always there. It's always going to be there. And there'll be times when you'll see a picture or something, and it just causes the tears to come. But I think knowing there are other people going through the same thing at the same time, having people that you can call and talk to, or maybe just somebody to go out to lunch with. We live between Salem and Scottsburg. And so our house, we had 5 acres, and it was kind of hard to take care of. 4 of the acres were just straight down because we were on the Knobstone Trail, and that was just valleys and hills. but the other was an acre that had to be mowed and taken care of, and I had flowers everywhere that had to be taken care of. And so anyway, I just thought I didn't have any family or really many friends, because Donna and I were kind of loners. We just didn't visit a lot. So I had before some of the young Amish girls come over and help me with housework, with washing windows, and they cleaned, well, they had cleaned like the walls and things. They painted for me and everything. And the girls that had helped me had grown up and had moved to Kentucky and were working in a candy store. So I had to find somebody else, and we have a store, an Amish store, not very far from us. And so I went over to check with Margaret and see if she knew somebody. And she said, well, I have grandkids across the road. She said they may be a little young, but they work really good. You know, it just, I know those little children coming around me helped me so much. They were giggly, you know, and just always happy. They were not stuck to a phone or to an electronic game or anything like that. And so they had boys that were, at that time they were 15 and 13. The two boys were, and then the girls were 8 and 10. But I got them to come over and help do some things, and they were really good workers. They worked way beyond their age. I mean, those girls were already doing a lot of the cooking and laundry and stuff for their mom. And so they got to be companions of mine. I would just have them, and they really helped with the grief. Just having somebody there to talk to or to help work and everything, having someone there. And their mother was just a very, very sweet lady. And so a lot of times on Friday I'd take her to town to get her groceries and things, and the kids, and a lot of times I just have the girls come over and make cookies. You know, they were good cooks. I decided to sell the house. Travis had a house for sale, or a house that he'd been renting, and the renters had moved. And I knew I could buy that house, and it was a nice small house in Paoli. And they helped me to move. They helped get everything boxed up. My boys had came over and got rid of a lot of the bigger stuff and everything, but these kids helped me with a lot of the small stuff and getting things boxed up and everything. So I got moved back to Paoli. And of course, one of the first things I did was start coming to church at Valeene, and it's just like I had never been gone almost. You know, the people are not the same ones, because so many have passed away that are my age, but there's still some that are there. But it's their children or their children's children, a lot of them are, that still go there. And they're kids that I watched grow up. You know, a lot of them are, I was friends with their mothers or whatever, and it's still a lot the same. They still sing the old songs. They still raise their hands in praise. They still go to the altar to pray. And the spatial music is still just wonderful. It always has been. And so it's just, it feels like home. It does. It just really feels like home. And my sons, when they got older and they got married, I'm very pleased to say that they have wonderful wives. They all done very well in picking out wives. Their wives are good, gentle people. I've never once had to worry about my grandkids being taken care of. Never had to worry about their friends, or you know, where they were going and what they were doing. Their mothers had it under control. Their mothers and their daddies had it under control. The oldest two boys are graduated from college and have their lives going on. Travis and Amy, their daughter Tori is in her last year of college, so and she's then will be going to get her master's, and so I'm very proud of my grandchildren and for the way their parents have raised them. They have been good wives to their husbands. Andy and Ginger have only been married a year, but during that, or probably a year and a half now, but during that year and a half, Andy's had cancer, and Ginger has taken such good care of him. She goes with him to every doctor's appointment. There is a song that I wanted to read the words to. It's a song that Linda Randall sang on the Gaithers. It's called If It Had Not Been for the Lord on My Side. And that's really the way I feel about my whole life. I don't know what would have happened if the Lord hadn't been there. I couldn't have gone through a lot of things without the Lord there. And so it says, if it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? Where would I be? He kept my enemies away. He let the sun shine through a cloudy day. He wrapped me in the cradle of his arms when he knew I'd been battered and scarred. So if it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? Where would I be? He never left me alone. He gave me joy and peace I'd never known. He answers when I get down and pray, and with victory he shows me the way. If it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? Where would I be? And I think a lot of people need to think about that and to give God the praise for where they are instead of where they could have been.